Colorado now midway through the preseason, 2.5 weeks in, 2.5 more weeks to go. Yeah. Our first opportunity this preseason to talk to tight ends coach Tim Brewster. He claims and vows that his group is going to be an asset for this football team, and even kind of alluded to understanding that the expectations on his group aren't very high, especially with Louis Pastorello going down with a knee injury.
Yeah, it's a really interesting group in that they only have 2 scholarship guys on the roster anyway. Then Louis Pastorello down with a knee injury. He did say, I asked if he's out for the year, and he said he doesn't really know. Caleb Fourier has not participated really in camp. That's the other scholarship guy, but he says he's getting close. So basically, halfway through the first half of camp, Tim Brewster's been working with nothing but walk-ons. And so, and he did say, hey, there's this negative connotation of walk-ons, but I got some good guys there. So yeah, he's really kind of like, hey, don't sleep on my guys because they're walk-ons. And, Mikey Harrison, or he's going to call him Michael, has been getting a lot of praise throughout this camp and stepping up really well in that transition from receiver to tight end. So it's an interesting group, because Sean Lewis's offense doesn't typically use the tight end. You look at the history of it. There's not a lot of tight ends that catch passes. I'm not even sure there's ever been a double-digit catch tight end that he's had, but they still need him, right? They need him to catch passes here and there. They need him to block, things like that. So it's an interesting group.
Yeah, and with Caleb Fourier, you just hope at some point he gets some good luck in terms of the injury situation, because he came here with a broken leg and has had multiple other injuries. Latest is dealing with a Liz Frank injury, which around here we're all too familiar because of Cepho Lufau. That's a tougher injury to come back from, but it sounds like he's pretty close. And he's always been a good Pac-12 caliber tight end, just haven't been able to see him stay healthy.
Yeah, he's one that when we've had a chance to see him in practices in the past under Carl Durrell, there were times that we'd watch him in practice and you were like, whoa, like that guy shows something. There was times I remember like after the catch, like he's pretty impressive after the catch. Physical, and you watch him like, wow, he'd be a lot of fun to watch. So it's been disappointing to not be able to see him. I'm sure way more disappointing for him than anybody else. But it's good to hear that he is close, because he was one of those guys. Coach Prime said last week a couple of tight ends might be out for the year. He was one that instantly came to my mind. So it's good to hear that he's necessarily not out for the year, that he actually might be close to playing again. So that's good.
Yeah. Also got a chance to talk to him about Elijah Yelverton, who played for Coach Prime in high school in Texas, goes to Iowa and had a medical issue. He medically retired at one point, hit the portal, ends up here, and it sounds like he's worked that rust off. I don't quite know what to expect from him, but he's a guy that's getting a lot of run right now and has got a big opportunity.
Yeah, and he's a guy that played high school ball with Shedeur Sanders. And so anytime you've got a rapport with your quarterback, if you're in a receiving position, that's a good thing. And so you have to think that Elijah Yelverton is going to be one of those guys that's in the mix that might get some chances. It does sound like, and if you watch the videos, looks like Michael Harrison is that top guy, but Elijah Yelverton's got to be in there as well. And so he'll be interesting to watch as well.
Rumblings around here that Shedeur Sanders had another excellent practice, which is the norm around here. Yeah. Even Tim Brewster began his media scrum with us talking about Shedeur and how special a talent he is. We're not trying to be a broken record, but he's pretty good at football. And again, while my expectations are higher than a lot of those outside prognosticators that just don't think this is going to be a good football team, with Shedeur Sanders as your quarterback, I just don't see that being the case.
Yeah, he's a guy that, I know he was on somebody's Heisman list. I don't put him on a Heisman list, but, he's a very good quarterback. There's a lot of very good quarterbacks that aren't going to be in the Heisman running, right? But they're very good quarterbacks. And what we've seen around here, it's got to be a massive upgrade from what we've seen the last 2 years. And, we haven't seen really good quarterbacking here really since the first part of 2020 when Sam Neuer, had a really good start to that season. And he was banged up at the second half of that year. But, then you go back to 2019 with Steven Montez, who, had an NFL type of arm. And so he was a very talented guy. So I think CU fans are just starved for a guy that can throw the football and then throw it to guys in the same color jersey and throw it for 6 points. He's a guy that can do that. I do think that I agree with you. When people are looking at this team, I think that's the one aspect people are not taking into account enough is how good Shedeur Sanders could be.
Season hasn't kicked off yet, and all the passing records, single-season passing records, are on notice at this point. Don't you feel like?
No question, because they're not that high. And obviously you and I know this, but a lot of Buff fans do too. But for most of their history, they've been a running football team. It was really mid '90s on that they started throwing the ball, and so the passing record was Joel Klatt. and then it was Cody Hawkins, and then it was Cepho Lufau, then it was Steven Montez, and so it's been broken several times, and it's really not even that big of a number. It's not even 8,000, I don't think, total career yards. So, and I'm not sure there's been a 3,000 yard passer. No, 3,000 maybe they've hit, but not 4,000. And so yeah. I wouldn't say the numbers aren't that hard to achieve, but a pretty good year by Shedeur Sanders could bring him a lot of records.
He could breeze by some of those records.
Yes,
Not trying to put too much on him, but
I know
there's
never been a 30 touchdown pass season in CU history. I think Cepho has a record at 28, but I don't know why I know that off the top of my head. But yeah, I think Shedeur could pass 28 touchdowns this season.
I had a chance to talk to Dylan Edwards' dad, meet his brother. Great people. You had a chance to talk to Todd Solomon, and I'm curious what your thoughts were there because, again, not trying to bring up too much of the past, but a year ago you couldn't construct a football roster the way that Coach Prime has here, and Todd Solomon was part of the solution there in terms of getting that fixed. Yeah,
the president of the university, obviously gives a lot of credit to Rick and Phil. They're the ones that spearheaded the whole hiring of Coach Prime and even the Big 12 move and all that. But that stuff doesn't happen if the president is not on board with the changes they made academically. And Todd Solomon and that academic side of things, and Phil DeStefano as well, obviously, made that happen. And Deion Sanders is not here without those things. And so you have to give a lot of credit to him. And Todd Solomon has to sign off on and get the regents on board with the Big 12 move as well. And so it's been a transformational 9 months for the University of Colorado. And, you have to give a lot of credit to Todd Solomon for what he's done to, if nothing else, back the athletic department in doing those things. He also, this isn't as big of a deal to football fans, but he also signed off and went and asked for the money that helped to get the facilities upgrades on the other side of campus for soccer and track and things like that. So he's doing a lot of those things as well. He's definitely an athletic supporter. He's a guy that when I covered women's basketball, he was at Duke University watching the women's basketball team. He was in Seattle watching them in the Sweet 16. So this is a university president that supports your athletic programs, and he's got a college athlete that I think one of his kids runs cross country or something like that. So yeah, I mean, this is a guy that supports the athletics, and I think CU fans have been sort of starved. They felt like there hasn't been that great support from the university. They've got it right now.
No doubt. I've definitely seen him at more sporting events than any other president. He hasn't been there as long as some of those other presidents that have been here. There's so many different things that had to come together to make what's happening out there happen. And again, I think a president almost pays more attention when a program hits rock bottom, right? Because you can't ignore it. And that's one of the things, maybe if they had gone 4-8 last year, there's not quite as much of that pressure on Phil DeStefano and Todd Solomon. So last year was brutal, but on some level it almost kind of had to happen for it to get to where it is right now.
Yeah, and he threw his support from day one. First time I really met with him and did an interview was literally 2 days before Carl Durrell was fired. And we were talking about the state of the program, and I ended up having to have a follow-up interview because things changed so much. But I asked him about Rick George at the time. I mean, there was a lot of, but there was a lot of pressure on Rick George before Carl Durrell got fired. Like, should Rick be allowed to make this next hire? And Todd Solomon put his full support behind him and said, yes, I believe in Rick George, all the things he's done. And I think that CU fans look at it now. I've seen a lot of CU fans, patting Rick George in the back lately for what's happened in the last 9 months. And again, credit Todd Solomon for sticking behind the athletic director and saying, yeah, I believe you're the guy.
It's getting warmer out here in Boulder, not quite to Texas level because we don't have the humidity, but it's starting to feel like dog days of summer, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's those 95, 96 degree days, and you look at the forecast every week, it's like, it's mid-90s every single day. And, it's got to be hot down there for those guys. And, at least they're practicing in the morning, but it's hot. And hopefully it's getting them ready for Texas. It won't be Texas, but hopefully it's getting them somewhat ready for that.
All right, we'll be back with more analysis on Friday.